Hey, rates. What we're going to do in this lesson is look at substitution with algebraic equations. So last lesson, what we did was we looked at variables and how they fit into questions. And today we're looking at if a question gives you the values of the variables, how we'd actually substitute those in. So initially, some of the questions will just have pretty basic addition or subtraction sort of concepts, and then eventually you'll get to understanding how that could relate to multiplication and division and potentially more than one of those in an equation. So this video here will just give us a brief explanation of what substitution is all about.
In this video, we will learn how to substitute values into algebraic expressions. Substitution involves replacing each pronumeral in the expression with the value it has been assigned. In this example, a has been assigned the value of 4. Let's look at an example.
So I'd really encourage you to pause the video when you're watching this to make sure you understand what's going on, and this would be a great opportunity to write down some of these concepts.
This problem, a is equal to -5 and b is equal to 4. Where there is an a in the expression, we replace it with -5, and where there is a b, we replace it with 4. So, after substitution, the expression 2a plus b becomes 2 times -5 plus 4, giving a final result of -6.
So similar to the last lesson, anytime we see one of our variables right next to a number, we know that that actually means times. That's how they've got this equation here.
Here is another substitution example, where m is 2 and n is -3. After replacing m with 2 and n with -3, the expression becomes 3 times 2 times -3, take away 12 divided by -3. This simplifies to give an answer of -14.
Don't stress too much about positives and negatives if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed here, but I guess the main thing that I want you to take away from this at this point before you start getting into the questions is the concept of how the numbers have been substituted in appropriately to make sure that they could solve the equation.
Let's look at one final example.
We'll move ahead just briefly, and I just want to make sure that we show the summary that they often demonstrate at the end.
Algebraic substitution involves replacing pronumerals with the values they have been assigned.
So that's the main thing that we want you to take away from this video and understand over the next couple of questions within the textbook. Can you appropriately substitute in figures within the pronumerals, right? So that's the conclusion of some of these explanations within this video. Another concept that you might want to understand briefly here as well is some of these concepts that you'll see here. So just a reminder, what we're understanding, and probably maybe a more simple explanation if you didn't understand. So if you did, you probably would just stop this video, but if you didn't, basically we're understanding that the letter is the variable. So if the video comes up again, the Q, this is our variable, and we're replacing with the actual numbers that we'll see up the top of a question. So in this example, the question would have said Q equals 5. So once you've replaced those, once you've done this first step here, the next step to do is actually calculate. Now, you would be using all the skills that you've learned over the last few weeks and maybe even into last term to be able to basically get a final answer. So here's an example of how some of the questions might look to you. It is sometimes appropriate that there might be more than one time in an equation where the variable turns up. So in this example, we can see D is turned up here and it is turned up here. So we would just replace the same number. For example, if D equaled 2, we would go 3 times 2 plus 4 minus 2. So it's really important that we make sure that we understand that it can come up more than once, and there might be more variables than just one. And then what we need to do is obviously solve the equation. In this example here, we need to make sure that we get the order of operations correct. And this is what I was talking about before, and the previous video talked about, is that we might be substituting in more than one number. So I can see here that we've got a equals 2 and b equals 7. So it would be appropriate for us to replace those figures. So here was the equation. It was a, which is where we've replaced the 2, plus 5. Now we know that this actually means times. So the 7 was substituted in here. That's how we got this final figure here. And again, then we would go and find out the appropriate value, making sure our order of operations is correct. So in this example, we would times first before doing the addition. So once again, just to make sure that we understand, there can be more than one variable. In this example here, I can see that there are 3 different variables, meaning that the question up the top would give us a value for each of these, and we would make sure that we literally replace these in the questions. Hopefully you've noticed here that somewhere within here there is a times as well, and I'll leave that for you to work out. All right, so that's a conclusion of some of the explanations, and the next video I'll give you is some worked examples. You might not need to look at those because you already understand this concept.